Remind me again, what's the state of my Shevchenko shtick presently?
You love her. She's your...
That's right, I secretly love her.
Most favorite character. She's your most favorite fighter in the UFC.
Okay, thanks for the reminder. Hello! Welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. And we are talking, I don't know, I'm still processing in my mind what angle I'm going to go on with Valentina Shevchenko's on this upcoming card, folks. And at this point, I don't know if I loathe her or secretly love her, if I publicly love her at this point. I'm not 100% sure what the bit is, so I'm going to kind of feel my way through it. For the first stages of this episode, Phil, no doubt you will be a tremendous help in pointing me in the right direction. No doubt I'll just sort of follow the feeling of bullying, you know?
I mean, the main thing I feel you have to remember is that not only is this a Valentina Shevchenko card, it's an Antonina Shevchenko card as well. And boy, I mean, I think what we need to be rooting for is for them both to win, and then them both to do the dance afterwards.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. Let me tell you, I did remember that was happening, and indeed, we had planned on talking about her. the other Shevchenko. No, we're mostly focused on the title fights. Very weird lineup here. By the way, we're going to get into last week's fights. Paul Felder, Rafael dos Anjos, certainly a far more entertaining fight than it was ever going to be with Islam Makhachev in Felder's position. And some other shit as well. Sean Strickland did the damn thing. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show today. So, I have to be honest. I don't know what's happening. That Deiveson Figueiredo versus Alex Perez, which is the main event of this card, was positioned above the women's flyweight title fight with Valentina Shevchenko, who is like at least a minor star at this point in the UFC. Or at least that's the way marketing treats her. I'm not 100% sure what kind of viewership she really draws in. But, like how often does this happen?
I mean, I think the main thing is that we have to think of this as not a Deiveson Figueiredo positioning, but a Cody Garbrandt positioning, because the UFC loves Cody Garbrandt.
Cody, yeah.
And this is merely a residue of that booking, because when it was Cody Garbrandt, obviously he was the headliner because he's blonde and he's got a neck tattoo, and yeah.
That's right. I had utterly forgotten Cody Garbrandt's part in this. God, they do. They love Cody Garbrandt, don't they?
So much.
And I really can't explain why. He's not charismatic, you know? Like, he's kind of unlikable as far as I can tell. His fights are fun. There's no denying that. I don't know. Anyway, trying to delve into the UFC's promotional tactics aside, I think both of these are fine fights. Figueiredo versus Perez. I mean, I like Alex Perez. I like Figueiredo. If this were a non-title flyweight fight just happening like last year, just a fight between two ranked flyweights, I would have enjoyed it just fine. It being a title fight doesn't really add any more stakes to it in my mind. That's kind of the feeling I have. Like, I don't know, like I used to get excited for Demetrius Johnson title fights because he was Demetrius Johnson. And I wanted to see as close as I'm going to get to perfection in action. So that sort of covered up for me personally for the fact that because the UFC never puts flyweight fights in prominent spots and certainly doesn't do anything to like build a narrative around their contenders, every title fight seems to kind of sneak up on you. And this is really how that feels to me. Like, it's a good fight. It just doesn't feel necessarily like a title fight. But then, does Valentina Shevchenko versus Jennifer Maia have the feeling of a Demetrius Johnson title defense to you?
I mean, it depends how much you like Valentina Shevchenko, in all honesty. If you want to just watch, like, weakness at work,
yeah,
you
like,
know,
that's
no
the
matter
appeal.
who it is, and, you know, there's no real argument that Valentina Shevchenko is probably the most skilled fighter in women's MMA at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Connor. And, you know, if you just wanted her to do her thing, and the thing is, you know, we've seen her against appropriately equally skilled competition. It's often not all that thrilling. If she's way better than people, then we get a cool styling. And, I mean, you know, not necessarily all the time. But, yeah, so, I mean, I guess it's just like, how much do you genuinely think of, like, Valentina Shevchenko as, like, a genuinely great generational fighter?
But if there is a title fight appeal, it's on that, like, yeah, as you're saying, it's on that Demetrius Johnson side of things. At least how I felt him at DJ back during his reign.
I mean, I think the Figueiredo Perez fight is interesting from another standpoint, because it is one of those ones where it's been disconnected so completely from the sort of previous generation of title challengers.
Right.
But also kind of stands alone as being something that could potentially establish sort of a new way for this division to work. Like, it really feels a bit reminiscent to me of Lawler Hendricks 1.
How do you mean? Like a style matchup, matchmaking?
So, I mean, I think the main thing that I think of when I think of Figueiredo versus Perez, like, and what they represent, is that this is sort of a new generation of incredibly physical flyweights. And more than that, physical and large flyweights.
Certainly. These guys are bantamweights, let's be real.
Yeah. These guys are fucking huge for this division. And I think this is, you know, I mean, obviously accidentally, the UFC did not really want this to happen. But in this way, it becomes a bit of a sort of a potential flagship for a new way that this division is going to work. Because we saw, you know, Perez versus Formiga was a torch passing moment, as was Figueiredo Benavidez. You just saw Undercard getting effortlessly cleaned out, and more to the point, effortlessly overpowered.
Yeah.
And these guys are physical, they are powerful, they are something, you know, are unlikely to have people look at them and have the criticisms that they had of the flyweights of old, you know, much as I love them. I mean, they're less likely.
Yeah, I mean, how much were those criticisms ever based in actual reality?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, there will still be some of it, but I think you're right. I mean, it does feel like it's going to be a fucking violent fight.
Two big, powerful hosses just.
Yeah. It does have the strange feeling of being, you know, like a bantamweight fight, basically, which it is hard to complain about. Okay, so enough about all this shit. Let's talk about the matchup. Deiveson Figueiredo, Alex Perez. You know, So again, I had completely forgotten that Cody Garbrandt was slotted in here. I don't know why that one didn't get its hooks into my brain. You know, that fight that everyone had been asking for ages. I need to see Cody Garbrandt challenge for the flyweight title. Now that he's finally gotten that win the UFC was desperate for him to have. So it didn't settle into my mind as that. The other thing though is like, I don't feel like I really developed a clear picture of the sort of track that Alex Perez was on after his loss to Joe Benavidez. Like, I don't know that I've really formulated a clear idea of precisely in what way his game had developed, if he was building himself up to a new approach to challenge for the title or whatever. Do you have any reads on Perez as a challenger? Since I don't know, I feel at least that I have not been spoon-fed this story quite to the degree that I would like.
Yeah, it was a real weird development from him, right? Because it was mostly just a physical force in his early his earlier career.
Great wrestler, super aggressive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then that Jose Torres fight showed something. Sorry.
Oh my god, it's happening.
Yep. Plague has finally got me.
Staved it off for all this time.
Yeah, somehow it's tracked me down on an isolated Greek island somewhere.
Yep. As will the law.
But so the Jose Torres fight showed that he was, becoming comfortable in his stand-up, and then he got completely obliterated by Joe B. And then had a not particularly impressive performance against Mark De La Rosa. I think then Jordan Espinosa and Jussier Formiga, you're seeing much more of a sort of synthesis of his approach.
Mm-hmm.
As in, he wasn't necessarily just running people over with, running an oversized opponent over with like tons of volume, nor was he just trying to like hustle him with wrestling, but he was, able to use his takedowns and his ground game, as well as being able to just like establish a solid mid-range game, with a healthy dose of feints, basically like a big, like jab and low kick guy, who's just gonna swing multiple punches in the pocket.
Yeah.
If you like get past that layer.
Yeah.
I think mostly it makes sense as like the development of a physical game, and or to that point, it has places that it can go after that.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think maybe there should have been indications that the previous track he seemed to be going down was not like ideal for him. Because that Jose Torres fight, the Shorty Torres fight, like he got touched a lot in that fight, as I recall it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically in the driver's seat the entire time. But that is not to say that some gravel didn't fly up and crack his windshield. And I think the main thing is, and this does actually stand out to me and ties into the thing you were talking about before about these guys being big and feeling weighty and big. Alex Perez is kind of slow for a flyweight.
Yes.
Like he's got slow hands in particular for a flyweight. And I think this, a super high volume style, just relying on his physicality and size. I don't know. It made him look like shades of like Tim Williams striking, or I don't know. What's another like,
who's your dude that you love down at, featherweight?
All of them.
Evan Dunham is obviously another example.
Yeah.
The guy who fought Evan Dunham.
Guy who fought Evan Dunham down at featherweight.
He fought him at lightweight and then went back to featherweight.
Guy who fought Evan Dunham. Why did you do this to me, Phil? You know how my brain works.
You love him.
Of course, but now I'm pausing in the middle of my podcast to look up Evan Dunham, and my internet is going slow, and I don't know what guy you're talking about, and I'm becoming scared and insecure. Was it, who the fuck are you talking about? Rick Glenn.
Rick Glenn, of course it was Rick Glenn. You love Rick Glenn. How could you not remember him?
I like Rick
Disgust
Glenn.
me, Connor.
Well, you weren't very helpful. You didn't even say whether he won or lost. You just said he fought Evan Dunham. God damn it. This is your last week on the show, Phil. I'm glad that the plague finally got you. I really am.
At least I didn't forget everything about Rick Glenn.
Shut the fuck up. But you know what I mean. When he's super aggressive, as he was before and got knocked out for it, it just had a certain sort of cumbersome feel to it. At least now I think there does appear to be a lot more like consideration put into his striking. Unlike someone like Alex Hernandez, he seems to have pretty quickly like taken away the right lessons, from what happened to him. And so now he's like, there's just a lot of, like layers, I think. When Perez is being really successful, it's because he is relying on his well-roundedness rather than forcing it on his opponent. And so you get lots of like feinted combinations before the actual, meaningful strikes. You of course get the mix up with the low kicks, between low kicks and punches that we saw in the Formiga fight. And then you still get the takedown threats, mixed in there. So I do think he has Looking at him now, I do think he's come along, but I still can't escape the impression that he's just very slow for a guy who's supposed to be a 125er. And Deiveson Figueiredo, for all of his similar size, is not. Maybe he has to stay on the back foot and manage his energy resources more to stay quick like that. It is an explosive kind of speed, but he is actually very, very quick. And, it's hard for me to not see that as just a tremendous advantage, to be honest. So to me, this looks like a matchup where like, it's critically important that Perez is able to out-wrestle Figueiredo, because if he can't do to him something like what Formiga did to Figueiredo, I don't know how he's going to do better than, say, Pantoja, or somebody like that on the feet. What do you think? Wow. He's muted. He's screaming into the wind now on that Greek island.
On mute. Yep. So one of the things about this is that it comes down to hello?
Comes down to
okay, maybe we should just put a marker down here. And...
I've got the marker down already, don't worry.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that this comes down to is sort of similar to the Cody Garbrandt fight is question of like initiation. Because I was one of the people who said, when they booked the Cody Garbrandt fight with Figueiredo, I was like, yeah, this has been booked as a matchup of two, huge power punchers and knockout threats, but it might actually just end up being super boring because neither of these guys ever really likes leading all that much.
Imagine that, a flyweight Lewis and Ngannou. Imagine. Could have been beautiful.
Well, I still think that's kind of true of Figueiredo. Like, he's not a big leading guy. He will, but mostly because he wants you to do something, and it's mostly just a long, lancing left hand. And it's because he wants you to draw it in. He wants to draw you into something. The only time where he's really active, I think, in going after people offensively is when he fully has them backed up into the cage and circling. He's actually very good there. We saw that against Joe B. Like, he was able to, but also against Pantoja himself. Like, he's good at using hooks to hurt people, and then he just like slides a right hand along as they're scooting along the cage and drops them.
Yep.
That's really like one of his money things, but he's not really like a huge exchange initiator. We've had the old Romero comparison a bunch of times, and yeah, he is an explosion guy. So I do think it's interesting, like, what lends the direction, how the directionality of this fight works out. Because Figueiredo is not, I think, particularly someone who's concerned with cagecraft. He gets backed up himself a lot. Mostly he's just happy to catch blitzes and turn people, and he's been fighting people where he can do that, like Benavidez or Pantoja, who will charge him. Like, what if he's fighting someone who's more likely to like feint their own way that in behind jabs and low kicks?
Yeah, that is precisely what Perez has been doing in his most recent fights. Like I said, is all that layering. So that's a fair point. Does the fact that Perez is just so hand slow make a difference there, though? Like, Figueiredo can definitely just sit down on a punch. I mean, I guess he's got to worry about the threat of the takedown. Which I did. I don't think Perez is so much hand slow as he is just like, he is just a bit plodding. I think that'll probably be the problem. It's still going to be just straight up catching Figueiredo. Yeah.
But even then, I think he's less likely to go nuts and just charge him than like Pantoja and Benavidez were.
Yeah.
I think that could be really interesting, because if he can find a way to cut down Figueiredo's movement, and if he can just set like a steady pace, I'm not sure if like Figueiredo's really like built for that. Pantoja fight is very hard to like judge from that perspective because it was just an insanely violent back and forth brawl. Figueiredo was not he wasn't looking in great shape in that fight.
Well, no, but in the same, Romero gets tired too. Like it's part of it. And the killer ability is still kind of there, I think, more than it appears. I think that the scenario you're laying out makes it sound like it sort of inevitably becomes a more exciting fight if that's the approach Perez takes. Because Pantoja was just insistently aggressive. Wasn't nearly as clever as what I think Perez can do. But he did just stay on it and wasn't dissuaded, and so it forced Figueiredo to have to exchange and throw down with him in spots. It forced him to pick his moments to stand his ground. So I don't know if if I'm just gonna chicken out basically and just be like, hey, I think Figueiredo's really powerful and fast, and will pick up on nuances of timing, but really just the physicality. I know Perez is a big guy, but I don't think he's the same kind of athlete Figueiredo is. I think he's strong, but I think Figueiredo is that and then something else. And I just see Perez just getting dinged in exchanges. And
yeah, I think that's probably what I think I am probably going to pick Figueiredo, but I think it's for the fact that I just think Perez is still pretty hittable.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that, what we're talking about is in terms of his improvements they are, layering his offense to make it harder to know when he's coming in or what he's committing to.
Right.
They are, throwing combinations in the pocket, and they are using his wrestling more judiciously. None of these are, in fact, along the lines of,
better defense?
Yeah. Any kind of better defense. It's just his defense is still his offense. His offense is just a lot cleverer.
He may have figured out how to stop Jussier Formiga hurting him, or hitting him clean in the first 2 or 3 exchanges. But when Formiga did get his timing, he was still able to just crack him when Perez was walking into strike.
Yeah. I still think there's a lot to be really interested about in this fight because Figueiredo and Formiga are both sorts of counterfighters in their own way. And, Perez showed that if you give him the opportunity to set up offense on him, he's very, very nasty.
Yeah.
Benavidez just rushed him. I don't think Figueiredo's going to do that.
No, I think but I think he can be coaxed out by insistent pressure for sure.
And Figueiredo also not exactly the world's greatest defensive fighter. Again, he's just someone who's mostly happy to get hit because he knows he can hit you back harder.
Yeah.
So, I think it probably just says we're going to get a super violent fight, maybe trading knockdowns, probably still favor Figueiredo just because he does have a bit more of a defensive edge. He's got more of a power punching dynamism edge. I think Perez's wrestling is. I need to see Perez have control wrestling against genuinely really good opponents before I can pick him to be able to do it against someone who can scramble Figueiredo.
Yeah, and the scrambling aside, there's also the footwork that you mentioned before. Even completing those takedowns in the first place is a matter of corralling Figueiredo or keeping him in front of you, which is possible. Yeah. But it would require great technique and planning and execution on a basic physical level. Figueiredo is just more agile.
Yeah, like I said, one of the reasons why Formiga was able to beat Figueiredo is that a lot of Figueiredo's attacks are lunging shots. If Perez can feint his way in and maybe hit reactive takedowns,
sure.
Again,
maybe.
It's the fact that I don't necessarily trust him to be able to keep control on Figueiredo.
Yeah, it doesn't operate like a standard wrestling game necessarily. Like here's a weird fact. I know he spent plenty of time grappling. According to Fight Metric, they don't credit Alex Perez with a takedown other than in the Jose Torres fight and 2 in the Formiga fight. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at knockdowns. My apologies. How embarrassing. Okay. 5 in the Eric Shelton fight. 1 in the Espinoza fight, 2 in the Mark De La Rosa fight. So there's a couple here and there. You know, I don't know. What kind of takedowns are they? Are they reactive blast doubles? Not to my recollection.
Yeah, although, like, I'm starting to, and we'll probably get to this later, after having seen Fodder blast RDA off his feet.
Sure.
Maybe I'm just never going to say, like, this guy never does reactive double legs anymore.
That's true.
It's just becoming one of those things which I can't, like, every time I say it, I'm just like, oh.
What was the other example,
fight,
too? It wasn't just Khabib's takedowns that Ed said would never happen and then did. There was
Chiesa.
There was another one recent. Oh, Bryce Mitchell also.
Oh, yeah.
Had increased wrestling powers. Everyone's been putting in on their goddamn double leg training lately for some reason.
And back to 2010.
Maybe because it still works. All right, well, both of us favoring Figueiredo for what, again, it feels sort of like a cop-out, but it's also like, I don't know that I had a lot of time for this fight to, like, sort of percolate and, like, fantasize about all the potential paths it could go down, which is what I love to do.
I think it could be an incredible fight. I think it could be,
sure.
It might just be someone, possibly Alex Perez, getting absolutely clobbered.
That's kind of what I'm worried about. Like, I look at that right hand Formiga landed, like 2 minutes into their round, and I'm like, can he take one of those from Figueiredo? Can he take one without his composure sort of being affected the way it was against Joe B?
And the fact that this was the last time that I think Joe B looked like a prime finishing threat was against Perez.
Yep, and just bullied him.
And you're like, does that mean that, like, this was the last flare of, and I guess it wasn't, because he looked like that against Formiga. But yeah, it makes you ask, like, does that mean that you might just be big and powerful, but maybe not that durable?
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing we know is that Figueiredo is extremely durable.
Yes, he is. So it's just kind of hard not to pick him is how I feel. By the way, I guess this is a good time to mention just before we wrap up, they cut Jussier Formiga like yesterday.
Yeah.
What the fuck? It's flyweight. You only have like 20 guys. And he's like been a top contender forever. So he fights 3 top guys, loses. Fucking.
Yeah, but he's just gonna beat up and comers.
Of course. But that's what he's for. And then if an up and comer beats him, he's legit. That's why you need him. He's really good. That's his role.
You need meme finishes. That's what you need for a title contender, Connor.
I just don't get it. They just started rebuilding this division. Sam Alvey is still on the UFC roster, Phil. Vinicius Moreira is still on the UFC roster.
Depress me.
Saperbek Safarov, which people did point out on Twitter when I initially pointed this out. Do I want him released into the general population? And the answer is no. But still, for purposes of contrast, Jussier Formiga, perennial contender, has been cut, and Saperbek Safarov, perennial trash can dweller, is still in the UFC. So there you go. I don't know. Just need to make myself mad and get fired up for what's coming next. Because you know what it is, folks. Valentina Shevchenko is fighting Jennifer Maia. Another similarly unhypeable title fight, in my opinion. But in this case, you have the appeal and or the strong repellent that is Valentina Shevchenko as the real highlight of that fight. So we're going to talk about that and her and all of it after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about the surprising co-main event. Still a surprise to me that this is not the main event, because I know the UFC loves Valentina Shevchenko. Which, you know, is a fair treatment they give to all of their dominant champions who don't lose. I'm so resentful about this, and I think I'm most resentful because, as Phil, you and I just sort of figured out, like, this is, you know, it's another one, really. It's another one, which is what you get with dominant, superior technicians like Valentina Shevchenko in completely shot to shit barren divisions like women's flyweight, or even relatively barren divisions like men's flyweight was under Demetrius Johnson, or middleweight under Anderson Silva. You know, it's the same dynamic. We've seen it before. And Jennifer Maia, she's another one. She's John Moraga. She's Patrick Cote. She's challenger number X. She's here to do the fight for as many minutes as she can survive. And that's the challenge you're supposed to get hyped to see. As you pointed out, Phil, Jennifer Maia is certainly, from an entertainment perspective, she's certainly the better kind of challenger for a fighter like Shevchenko. Because the really frustrating thing about Shevchenko, more than the dancing, more than the cold, empty, soulless eyes, more than the like gun collection and the sort of like feverish desire to use it that I sense behind her stoic face, it's really the fact that she's among the most risk-averse fighters in all of MMA. That, like, you know, we did our personality stylistic cheese block ages and ages ago. And as I recall, one of those factors was risk-averse. As opposed to, you know, brawling likes to exchange. That was the spectrum of one of those sides. And I feel like Valentina Shevchenko sort of discovers like a new square. You know, she's not like 1 risk averse, she's like 0. She's off the other end of the scale. And so if you are a completely outmatched challenger, but you fight a safe fight against her, she's not really going to make you pay. Like, she's not going to take the reins even if you just hand them to her round after round. You know, she's really, really stuck in what her style does. Conversely, when you come after her, whether you're like really good, like Ioana Jędrzejczyk, or really bad, like Priscilla Cachoeira, she is going to light you up. I mean, she's not going to go crazy reckless, and maybe scratch that itch that sometimes you just want scratched when someone has such a clear advantage. But even so, if you come forward, Valentina Shevchenko will shoot holes through you. And Jennifer Maia is, as far as I can tell, in basically every fight up to this point, like, she's pretty much just like a third gear aggressive fighter. She just sort of chugs forward. She's got a consistent pace. She throws the same 1-2 over and over again, and she throws it a lot. And so this is probably, of the two kinds of Shevchenko fight, you know, one of the better ones, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. She's going to wade forward and throw a bunch of punches. Like, she lost, and, like, she chased down, Chikagian and lost that kind of fight. See zero reason to assume why she can do better against Valentina Shevchenko. These title challenges are just really starting to reach the bottom of the barrel for this weight class.
Yep.
Maia isn't particularly on any kind of impressive streak, is she? No.
Nope,
she's one fight removed from that Chukagian fight. I mean, no, say what you like about like guys like Moraga or the dude that I actually genuinely really like, but
Chris
who looks
Carriasso?
absolutely terrified. Chris Carriasso, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Against, at least they were on like 3 fight streaks plus.
They earned it, and they were also like they were around. They were part of the ecosystem of that division's conveyor belt to the title. Like they had lots of other fights with. That was the good aspect of Flyweight, was that it may have been small, but like everyone was pretty competitive. So you could really make a bunch of matchups, and everyone basically fought each other. Women's Flyweight is like beyond small. And just no one's here. So this is what you get, is a fight where maybe competitively it's on a par with something like Carriasso versus Demetrius Johnson. Narratively, it is far worse because there's absolutely no buildup. But, the silver lining. Shevchenko's likely not going to take too many rounds before she wins this one.
Yeah, I mean, she'll probably like land a right hook counter to Maia, and then Maia will like nod and beckon her on, then charge her again, and then like it will happen twice more. And then like there'll be one of those like crux moments in the fight where Shevchenko will be like, I want to try that hard to knock this person out, and Maia will decide, do I want to try that hard to beat this person when I will just get knocked out for trying it? And then we'll know whether it's going to be like a knockout or a decision.
You're right. Even in this, there could still be that turn where Maia decides she doesn't want to be sacrifice victim number 8.
This is about as dismissive as we might have been of like any title fight perhaps ever, but it really, like, there's really not a lot to say other than this is just going to be tape study for Shevchenko against Andrade, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about the undercard. I mean, look, if you like Shevchenko, you're going to enjoy it. She's going to be doing her thing. So, what
I mean, it's probably going to be pretty violent. It's going to she's going to land some pretty counters.
Yeah.
Fine, there's just not much to say.
Yeah. You know what you're showing up for. It's what it says on the box. Okay, let's take a look at this undercard. There's actually a couple crazy things on here that we didn't even mention. So we're going to try and do a real quick run through since we just had a abbreviated discussion of the co-main event. First of all, I mean, we got to hit the one that everyone really wants to hear about. Shogun Rua versus Paul Craig 2.
Yes.
We were waiting. There was something inconclusive about the ending of their previous fight. I don't know if it was the draw scorecards. I don't know if it was the fact that it sucked for 3 rounds. I don't know what it was, but I just knew when that final bell rang, or when that final horn blew, that we would have to see this one again. And I have nothing technical to say other than that I hope Shogun does absolutely nothing different. I hope he spends 3 rounds wrestling and grappling with Paul Craig. And the one other note is that I think Paul Craig will probably spark him out, actually, because he's like still like a human whose body is changing and who can come up with new ideas and things. He's not a complete shot shell of a man. And he did actually show like new stuff after that Shogun fight. So, yep.
Yeah. I've been criticized for my matchmaking, for my potential matchmaking for like old, fading guys before, where I've been like, let's just, annihilate them because that'll teach them. This feels particularly vicious.
Why? Because
beyond even what I would do.
Because it's the same guy you just had a draw against?
Right, yeah.
It's so cruel.
So mean.
Jesus.
To be like Shogun Rua, like this.
Oh my god.
Who was this like youthful tornado of Brazilian Muay Thai kind of kickboxing in Pride. And who are getting absolutely tuned up on the feet by this mal-coordinated Scotsman.
Oh god.
You had to wrestle him. Now, do it again. You're a bit older now. So mean.
It really is.
Yeah, he's going to get knocked out
Honestly,
on the feet.
Honestly, like now that you frame it that way, I'd rather see Shogun be like Rumble Johnson's comeback fight.
Right, exactly. Like, I feel like there's a certain clean finality to just loading old guys into the metaphorical cannon and just blasting them out into the sunset.
There's a certain justice.
This is mean.
There's a certain justice to pouring the disjointed parts of once great fighters into the channel, which turns them into slurry for the planet where the under the skin people come from.
Sunrise, sunset.
Yeah. Okay, so there's nothing technical to say about that one. Let's do what this show is nominally supposed to be about, and actually break down the matchup. Do you want to talk about Mike Perry versus Tim Means? Or should we talk about one of these other ones that's like more technical and good?
I mean, I think we should talk about it.
It's interesting.
I think, because it's an interesting one, because it's one of these ones where Tim Means really, really should win it. He's probably not going to.
Yeah, don't say that.
Because the main thing is that, like, Tim Mead's game is too deep to beat Mike Perry. What I mean is that, like, someone like Max Griffin was just like, oh, I'm going to do one thing.
Don't try to build. Don't try to get fancy with the stuff that's working.
Yeah, but so the thing is that, like, Tim Means, he flows back and forth between range striking and the clinch.
Oh, yeah.
And I think when it gets into the clinch, Mike Perry's going to get hold of him, and then he's just going to start bullying him. And then Tim Means also always goes for takedowns. I think we'll talk about this more when we get to RDA Felder. I think this is sort of this is an old person thing where he feels like, you feel like you need to get control. He's really starting to go for takedowns a lot nowadays. I think when Perry presses him, he's going to go for takedowns. He's going to get fucked up for it. He's going to get knocked out. It's going to be really sad.
If he just completes a takedown, that would be pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
That would be big.
Mike Perry is no one's idea of a fantastic grappler.
Yeah, that would actually be like a potential turning point in the fight. So you could understand why he would want to go for them. Makes it a difficult proposition, I guess. Yeah, this is another one where it does really just come down to physicality, which sucks. Because Tim Means is so good. Like, he really is. I feel like for whatever reason, like I get excited every time I get to talk about him on the Vivisection, which is often. Because he is typically a pretty damn active fighter as well. And yet I don't feel like we've hardly ever talked about him on Heavy Hands. Tim Means is like fantastic. He's like one of the best technical strikers in the UFC. He's, I was going to say like he's not the best defensively, and I guess he does get touched a lot in his fights, but I actually kind of think in a way he is among the better defensive fighters in MMA. He's very difficult to hit clean, and the reason he gets touched so much is he has a style. And this is really like his undoing now that he's getting old and he's still fighting guys like Mike Perry. His style invites exchanges. Like Tim Means is a fearless technician. He wants you to come. Like he knows in a Marquesian way that the moment you come in thinking you're about to knock his block off is exactly when you're most vulnerable. And just after it. And so he wants you to come into the pocket. Like you talked about the stable connection between the clinch and range striking. Well, that stable connection is the pocket. And like Tim Means will like slip and roll and shoulder roll and throw counter combinations, in triplicate and shit, like in the pocket. He is a really fun pocket counter puncher. And yeah, like I think I have to agree with you mostly just because like I saw the Nico Price fight, the Sergio Moraes fight, even the Daniel Rodriguez one to an extent, the Matt Brown fight, like just more and more, as Means' career has gone on, he ends up in these, as he's gotten older especially, he ends up in these matchups where he could so clearly, comfortably win it if he didn't need it to be a scrap. But he needs it to be a scrap. Like, that's where his technician brilliance shines. And it really shone when he was younger. And so he's going to allow Mike Perry into the fight because that's how he finds his best moments. And I just don't think those good moments are as easy to come by as they used to be. The timing isn't 100% there. The durability isn't 100% there. And it really hurts me because he still looks great.
There is one shining light here, which is that Perry looked like absolute dog shit against Mickey Gall.
He sure did. That's true. Mike Perry is falling apart. He is like, frankly, it took longer than I expected, but just like, putting him in this situation, maybe the UFC doesn't even have anything to do with it. Like, Mike Perry is honestly just an asshole. Like, he's been going around on Twitter now, like, he had a moment the other day that my head almost exploded encountering it, where a woman was like, "Hey, you beat your ex-girlfriend." And he was like, "No, I didn't. And to prove it, I'm going to threaten to beat you." And it was a woman he was talking to. Like, he's really off the fucking rails. And beyond all of that outside the cage shit, he, didn't have a cornerman for his last fight and looked like it. And this was already, like, when Mike Perry was at his absolute worst, which I would say was probably the Ponzinibbio and Max Griffin fights, when he looked completely flat, like he was not only not developing, but actually finally, like, getting worse, technically. He was like in between camps and didn't have like a head coach situation. Like, Mike Perry, more than perhaps anyone else on the roster, is a fighter screaming out for like a fatherly hand to guide him in the gym. He needs guidance, and he doesn't have it. So yeah, you might be right. He'll probably make some terrible fucking decisions. And Means might actually like really hurt him. Like, that is the advantage of Means being more than a Max Griffin or whatever, is that when the moment comes that Perry is getting tired or whatever, he'll crack him with 4 punches in a row. He'll hit him with elbows and knees in the clinch, whatever. So I don't know. That makes me feel slightly better, I guess.
I mean, like, I think I would feel much more confident in Mike Perry beating a faded, Tim Means if he hadn't looked like just total dog shit and have been largely losing the striking to Mickey Gall and being forced to out wrestle him.
I'm gonna pick Tim Means. Fuck it.
And yeah, that sentence made me very tempted.
Yeah, you did it for me.
I was saying it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pick Mike Perry. I'm gonna side on that shit. Fuck it.
That was my feeling coming in. But when you really did lay it out clearly there, though, it's like, you know what? I have to pick Tim Means. That's the thing with picking Tim Means too, is that when he loses, he flies so fucking close to the sun. Mm-hmm. So like, there's always that hard turn from utter joy and elation to heartbreak is always just a finger's breadth away.
Singeing the feathers of the dirty bird.
I don't think I like that. All right, let's talk about one more on this undercard. Not a bad undercard overall. And there was another one we wanted to mention as well. Daniel Rodriguez, Nicholas Dalby. Not sure we'll have time, but maybe we'll get to it in a moment. The one that really stands out is the so-called featured prelim, Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. Personally, I think I would have rather seen Brandon Moreno in the title shot over Alex Perez, but if he can get a win here, I think makes perfect sense to give him another minute. I think Brandon Moreno has gotten really fucking good in a way that I thought was happening way before it was. Then became convinced simply was just not happening and was not going to happen, and then seemed to come out of nowhere and smack me in the face. And what I'm talking about is Moreno, like, as a boxer. I thought back when he had that little stint with Dwayne Ludwig, after the Ultimate Fighter. And, that was when he head kicked Dustin Ortiz. He had a few striking moments where he seemed to be picking his shots more because he was always such a scrappy brawler. And then, yeah, it just sort of seemed like none of that really shaped up into a functioning system or like a process on the feet. He kind of just reverted back to the old school scrappy brawling and was just once again a fighter who, if he couldn't get you down on the ground, he was either going to like go completely even with you or he would lose. And then, he comes out against like, which one was it where he really, really showed up? Was it the Kai Kara-France fight?
Kara-France, yeah.
Yeah, he shows up. I think maybe in the Askarov fight as well. He had some great moments. But yeah, against Kai Kara-France, he just like, I don't know, he looked like a professional boxer. Like jabs, feints, combinations with variation from one to the next. Not like picture perfect defense, certainly. It's always the last thing to come along in MMA, but like suddenly channeling that willingness to get hit and hit back into something really intelligent. It's like if Mark Henry got to work with a brawler, where his philosophy of like, okay, if you're going to get hit him back 4 times. And so, yeah, against Kai Kara-France, like Kara-France is also a good technical fighter, great counterpuncher, has better defense than Brandon Moreno, and was landing a lot in the early going. And Moreno just like has developed this style that allows him to keep such a firm grasp on the momentum and the initiative of the fight that like if you hit him, you're getting hit back. Then you try to get out so you can reset. You're being followed by jabs. He's constantly setting you up with feints. It's like intensely aggressive without ever really feeling reckless. And I don't know where it came from. Like he just suddenly became a really good, like straight punch throwing mid-range boxer. But it rules.
I mean, this is another sort of interesting thing about the flyweight division at the moment is the changeover. And I think both Perez and Moreno kind of fuck to this dynamic because both of them have like significant arguments for being just out of sight improved. Both guys where we looked at them, I think both guys where we had that same sort of journey, that you mentioned, where we were like, oh, is this guy really getting good? And then we're like, oh, no, he's not. He just got absolutely torched.
Right.
We're like, no, actually, he's really good. And we refuse to accept it because, we got burned the first time. But yeah, he's genuinely like a pretty remarkable fighter now. And, like Perez, I think he does also fit in, and Figueiredo, he fits into that dynamic of being now like a huge physical flyweight.
Sure. I mean, he's still scrawny compared to these other guys.
He's a bit scrawny, but like he looks very different to the way he is.
That is true. He looked like a teenage boy 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, like he's like, and I think that's a lot of where his success is coming from is just like him learning how to use his reach effectively.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's like for that division. Again, I think this is one of those things where, this would be different were he at bantamweight.
Mm-hmm.
Like long rangy boxers are really not part of the metagame at flyweight.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really suddenly like, shocking guys like Jussier Formiga because wasn't blitzing in. He wasn't like, he wasn't doing anything that Formiga could counter because he was just attacking him from range again, like much like Perez did, just with a different tool set.
Yeah. Absolutely. And all of this isn't even mentioning the guy he's fighting, the other Brandon.
Yeah.
Who, if Brandon Moreno is, I don't know, some kind of like flyweight Calvin Kattar type all of a sudden, Brandon Royval is just flyweight Tony Ferguson. That's my read, and I'm sticking to it. He's insane. He also has an impulse to just get hit and then keep going, but it expresses itself in utterly bizarre choices. Like, for example, when Kai Kara-France, I think, dropped him with like a left hook. And in falling down, Brandon Royval went to his hands and knees and popped back up with a spinning elbow that dropped Kai Kara-France right back.
Oh, yes.
Like, that's not... If Brandon Moreno has now went from being like a sort of formlessly organic scrapper to this like pared down, focused technician, Brandon Royval is somebody who leaned fully into the like organic side of things. Like to the extent that if he weren't constantly surprising people, he'd probably be getting fucked up an awful lot. You know what I mean? Because if he can't surprise you, he's just running into your shots and you know what I mean? Like he had a lot of moments against Kai Kara-France. A lot of his successes were in that moment where Kai Kara-France was like, getting wide-eyed and starting to salivate because the opportunities were just presenting themselves to him over and over again. And that was when he would get cracked by Royval. He hurt, I mean, if Royval did not have a chin, for example, he would have lost that fight at any one of a dozen different points. But he didn't, because he's crazy and creative, and I don't know. How do you describe Brandon Royval other than just...
I mean, flyweight Tony Ferguson is pretty much...
That's it, right?
Because you're going to get, right, yeah.
Right.
As you said, if he did a bunch of his stuff in neutral space, he would get killed for it. But it's the fact that he's just doing so much of it that people are overloaded.
Yeah.
And Kai Kara-France is, he's a hard person to overload.
Exactly, yeah. Same, I mean, like I said, Brandon Moreno, with the nice jabs and feints and all these wonderful setups and combinations, still had a hell of a time trying to seize the momentum from Kai Kara-France in that fight. It was a battle. And Royval, for whatever reason, Royval's fight, even though he got fucked up way worse than Moreno did not feel like, it felt so much more one-sided, like it was his fight the whole time.
Yeah, agreed.
Weird. I have to assume Moreno has the advantage here. Like, it's heavy hands. What am I going to do? I'm going to pick the crazy guy who doesn't do anything right. The guy who doesn't have a jab and has to bite on every single counter opportunity given to him. Or else his opponent might figure out that he's secretly a sham inside. That's how Royval's style feels to me. You know what I mean? It's please don't ask me a question. Please don't ask me a question. Please don't ask me a question. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Moreno is there's a reason that the textbook is the way it is. The straight punches are very, very effective for stopping somebody who essentially does not have range tools, who essentially just walks into the pocket again and again. And I honestly think the fact that Moreno, more so than Kai Kara-France, is more of just a rote volume puncher is helpful for him in that kind of regard. Because as long as he trains into himself, just throw out the jab every time he tries to step forward. As long as that's his coach's thought process at least some point during the camp, then he's gonna hit him. He's not going to be able to help but hit Royval coming in. Royval's going to be there. So I have to favor Moreno, with the added fact that is himself a tremendous scrambler who you could probably argue, except for Dustin Ortiz out wrestling him, and Alexandre Pantoja, you could argue otherwise he's basically never been out grappled. And even Pantoja had a lot of success on the floor against him. So with that in his back pocket and the way more functional, distance management game on the feet, it's hard for me not to pick him. But, like I said, I'm always going to pick against guys like Royval because I fundamentally don't understand them.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly gonna co-sign on that one. It's pretty much agree with it across the board, I gotta say.
Cool.
I think the other thing is that, like Figueiredo, that Moreno's chin is incredibly battle tested.
Yeah.
Partially because of that fight with Pantoja.
Yep. Who is a hell of a puncher.
He got hit a whole bunch. He got hit a whole bunch by Sergio Pettis. He's one of those guys that never looks particularly badly hurt. He just looks disconcerted when he's hit really hard.
Yep, and less so now, because now he knows what to do about it.
Yeah. And I think that was also just a big advantage against Kai Kara-France.
Yep.
He was, I've got reach on this guy, and I can take his punches when he hits me.
Yeah, I mean, he and Royval... Go on, sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah, even Formiga, really.
Right. He and Royval both relied on their chins, but it's different. It was a different dynamic. Moreno, without his chin, maybe would have lost 2 rounds, but then still won the 3rd. If he didn't just walk in and knew he could withstand those punches, it might have just taken him more time to get rolling, but I think he would have gotten rolling. Royval, without his chin, would have gotten flatlined. At almost any point, because he had to walk through so much, and there's no other way that he fights. So, okay, it's a banger. That is absolutely guaranteed action. That is the most exciting fight on the card, no question. If you were to not miss one fight on here, Mike Perry, Tim Means, that's going to be a blast. It can't help but be a blast. Figueiredo Perez is probably going to slow cook until it becomes a blast. There's exciting stuff to be had here, but Moreno Royval is scintillating. A word I overuse, but it truly is actually scintillating. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we are pretty much going to finish with Figueiredo Perez and its undercard, which includes Shevchenko. I do like that, I guess. I like that I get to sort of lump her into the undercard. And we're going to come back and discuss RDA versus Felder. Weird short notice replacement atop the greatest card in UFC history, which we will also be discussing after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's go ahead and talk about last weekend's main event. Raphael. Jesus Christ.
Jesus, Connor.
Right? What's wrong with me today?
Rafael dos Anjos.
Rafael dos Anjos took on Paul Felder. And as everyone said, Islam Makhachev was we could see what was happening in that matchup. He's going to harvest RDA's remaining name value. And set himself up for a more meaningful name challenger next. Paul Felder steps in on short notice, and instantly the fact that RDA can win this makes it a far more compelling matchup, of course. And it was. In fact, I think we were just talking last week, Phil, about fights like this, where the correct result is wide scorecards, but the fight itself is not reflected by those scorecards. The level of competition. And I think this was a perfect example of one of those fights. What we would otherwise call, competitive, but not close. I thought it was pretty clear RDA won, but I thought Paul Felder, was fantastic as expected and really showed up and gave him resistance at pretty much every point he could, until really the end of the fight, where I think his, triathlon training was not quite so helpful once RDA started to complete those takedowns and really grind him out. But up to the last 2 rounds, Paul Felder was super competitive, just was not, ever winning.
Yeah. And I think we pretty much did the right thing. I think in calling this one, this was a decent call.
I feel that we did all right.
Yeah, because we made sure we pulled out the fact that RDA is his ability to basically control the grappling was going to be the difference. And it sort of was, although not necessarily.
Yeah, not as much as I expected, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things that I thought was interesting, is that was able to get a lot of takedowns, but he wasn't able to. I mean, he wasn't actually able to get that many takedowns, and it took him a long time to convert them into significant top control.
Yep.
I was actually genuinely pretty impressed by Felder's cage wrestling. Especially like as compared to the Oliveira fight. But also like the commentary team kept saying that Felder is winning on the feet and Dos Anjos is, just out grappling him. I don't really feel like that was the dynamic either.
Yeah, no. I don't even feel I want to find out actually if they've been changed. Because they flashed the statistic that Paul Felder outlanded RDA on the feet. During the event at some point. And I was like, that doesn't feel right. Like, it's been close. Yeah, okay, well, according to Fight Metric, officially, 98 significant strikes for Paul Felder against 92 from Rafael dos Anjos. So if he did indeed outland him, it was by a very small margin.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I felt like there were definitely moments where it seemed like Felder was landing the harder shots. But there were also long stretches where it felt like RDA was just touching him over and over. And to me, there were an awful lot of Felder's punches as well, which were mostly just hitting RDA's guard. And I think it was one of those cases too where RDA's, like, at this point, it's like a reflex. It's like you hit his knee and his leg moves and there's literally nothing he can do about it. The way that he disengages and runs away in a straight line, when somebody stands their ground and tries to trade with him, does not make him look good. It sort of looks like he's being bossed around, even when it's like, in this case, Felder did not convert that into consistent pressure, so it truly was like he was just missing. But RDA, I think, looked like he was being dissuaded. So maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing, because otherwise I thought RDA, I mean, yeah, he looked pretty great. And I think, you sort of mentioned this last week, Phil. The thing with RDA as a lightweight, like, the thing that really changed between his lightweight and welterweight careers was kind of a tone shift. Where, like, every lightweight fight he ever had was intensely scrappy. He would throw himself into the fire and, like, he would, like a grindstone or something. Like, he would demand that the opponent respond with their physicality so he could use his to overwhelm them. But he would, like, the opponent would have to resist and it would have to become like a grind in a way. And that kind of went away. He's tried to become more neutralizing, more, like cleanly controlling or evasive as a welterweight. That whole griminess sort of went away. I think when you mention him not having as much easy success with the ground control and grappling as you expected, I agree. But I also think, like, that's okay. I think what really matters here and what sort of is at the heart of that difference between 155 and 170 is that RDA just feels comfortable going for the takedowns. Like, I think very clearly he felt like lightweight RDA again. Even if they weren't leading to easy control or anything, he was forcing Paul Felder to defend physical, sustained wrestling attacks mixed into his pressure striking. And the more he was able to do that, the easier clearly it was for him to pressure on the feet as well, to pressure with his strikes. So yeah, I think that, I think that's always kind of been the case where RDA's never been like, even as a lightweight was never like a blow you away takedown artist, but, just being able to like grab onto your legs and mash you against the fence really works for him mentally. It works for his confidence, and makes him more aggressive overall.
Yeah, I thought that kind of showed where RDA was as a, like, aging fighter as well.
Sure.
Because it did feel like, so with regards to, like, that striking dynamic, and I mostly thought the striking was very even. I probably edged a lot of it to RDA, like, especially in the early going, just because, he was landing the left hand and body kick change up. Like, I felt like most of the really hard strikes were coming from RDA, and you could see, like, Felder reacting to them more. Like, when RDA sort of gave up, gave up the center or gave up pushing Felder back. It did look like Felder was, and because Felder just looks like a big, mean bully when he's fighting.
Yeah.
But I still felt like a lot of the cleaner strikes were RDAs.
I agree.
But I really felt like he wasn't actually enjoying being in extended striking exchanges. So I think that, there's a dynamic we've called out before, which is that, I just don't think RDA just wants the wrestling edge in all the fights he's in.
Yeah.
He wants to be the better wrestler all the time. I just felt that that had expanded more.
Sure.
He did not want to be striking as much as he previously would have been. Really wanted to be wrestling. And
rather than needing the wrestling edge, is almost a little more like content with like getting to wrestle.
Yeah.
Like at least here I can, without like gassing myself or just getting overpowered, I can afford to go for these takedowns and pour energy into them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with that.
Yeah, and I think, the problem with Felder, it was sort of all the ones that we called out. I mean, again, his wrestling defense was way better than we thought it was going to be.
Yep.
But I think it's also just that I think he has to force himself to not be a kind of neutral fighter, as in someone who's just going to take the pace that he's given. And I think I think he needs to be coached and trained into things like actively pressuring.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get him to push RDA back and to hold the center, and he was really trying to do it. But I think he's not a comfortable fighter in that way. He is a sort of mid-range, take the fight where it goes.
Yeah.
Kind of, Jorge Masvidal type, I guess, where he's just going to sort of take the fight you give him unless he's been absolutely coached not to. I think that was sort of to his detriment more than any like technical, even probably physical problem.
Yeah. I never thought of Paul Felder as an old young veteran, but he kind of is now that you mention it. Maybe that has something to do with coming up as Donald Cerrone's like chief sparring partner.
I think he is like one of those guys who's happy to be fighting.
Right.
And like a lot of his fighting style and who he is as a person sort of just reflects.
Yeah.
But he's gonna be there to be tough, and we're gonna be there to show who's tougher.
Yes.
He's not actually like, but he's also like a smart guy, so he can be coached into effective implants, but it's not something that he does naturally.
Exactly. I think he probably slots really naturally into like this enthusiastic little brother kind of role. Where he's there to rely on his toughness. I don't think he minds going through the ringer in that way. He made a big show of like, how willing he is to do brutal weight cuts, for example, in a quite stirring post-fight interview here. But the other thing is, like a lot of the other, the young journeymen who also develop this sort of okay with being tough and or okay with being defensive mindset. He's like an overthinker, where like he also sort of gets caught up with all these options if in a vacuum. So here, I think you really, really saw that. RDA was able to just do this like time tested, complete process driven game that worked for him so well for so many years. And Paul Felder is kind of figuring out as it goes along. But like you said, he's intelligent. So like given more time to prepare, Paul Felder is very game plannable. Or I don't know how to put that, but he's very capable of sticking to a strategy or game plan. He just like that, the ability that I think makes him a good game planner, can actually kind of bite him when he's fighting on short notice here. I don't know. It was great. I'm like finding reasons to say that it was somehow like less than it should have been. It really wasn't. It was better as a fight in and of itself. It was way better than the one that was originally made. Respect to Paul Felder for taking it and like losing his ranking and just not giving a fuck. That's awesome. And I like seeing RDA win. So.
I don't think Paul Felder lost his ranking. I think like RDA went up at welterweight or something.
Yeah, maybe. Probably. I don't know. Paul Felder said he risked his ranking. I don't know if he lost it or not.
Yeah, that would sort of necessitate the our ranking committee not being a group of chattering idiot monkeys.
Whoa. Phil, come on. It's a time-honored institution, the rankings committee. We have to respect the office. Okay, let's talk about what else? I really want to talk about Sean Strickland real quick.
No, you do.
Should we talk about that next, or should we mention Chaos Williams?
I mean, it was funny, but there's not much else to say.
I think what I like about Chaos Williams is that he has exactly the personality I think you would expect from someone who unironically calls themselves Chaos with a K.
This is very true.
He's perhaps the most self-serious fighter in the UFC, and that's all I really have to say about him, is that he's just so grave, so severe. Like he really thinks he's like a comic book villain, and I'm kind of cool with it. Sean Strickland, though, Phil, come on. His style's so weird, you know? I really thought it wasn't working, to be honest. Brendan Allen looked better. He's apparently been working with Henry Hooft, and his striking got several shades better than in his previous outing. In fact, like Kyle Daukaus was lighting him up with combinations in his fight, just one before. And he came out like pressuring. He was throwing double jabs. Always love a double jab. He was throwing combinations. He was hitting the body, like big left hooks to the body as a switch up off the right hand. He was kicking the legs. And all of this was being set up with jabs and feints and pressure. It was such a drastic difference from his previous outing that I was kind of convinced at the get-go that it was really gonna continue to give Strickland problems, as it did in the first few seconds. Cause like if you come in with lots of jabs, there's one fatal flaw in Sean Strickland's beautiful striking style, which makes him susceptible to those jabs. Can you guess what it is, Phil?
No.
It's having zero head movement.
I thought it might be that, yeah.
Absolutely none. Sean Strickland is, I mean, I don't know if you can put these things on a scale, but if there is a scale, he's the most upright fighter in the UFC. He's very tall and stands very tall and, barely even really leans back. Like it's either footwork or getting a hand in the way. Because if he doesn't have either of those, to stop the punch from landing, it's probably going to land. And fortunately for him, he's quick and he has good eyes and he does keep his feet moving and he does use his hands to deflect things. He's just sort of like a more cautious Tony Ferguson in that way. The target is there. It's just a matter of can he see it coming or not. Brendan.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning it, I think of him as a combination of like, Calvin Cater and Martin Kampmann.
Yes. Yeah. He's a really tough Martin Kampmann. Not that Kampmann himself wasn't tough, but Sean Strickland almost never gets hurt. But, very, very much that sort of dynamic. He is just profoundly hittable. And if you come in with good educated striking, you're going to hit him. And yet he's still Sean Strickland. And in like exactly the same way as he did way back in the day. One of my favorite slow-paced simmers of all time, his fight with Tom Breeze, was kind of the same, where Tom Breeze's reach was giving Sean Strickland problems. His straight punches were giving Sean Strickland problems. And, slowly, more quickly here, actually, which is a good sign, he just sort of, found weird, interesting ways of countering. Like, he is a truly, again, young journeyman type shit here. He's a truly organic fighter. He does seem to like come up with his answers completely on the fly. And I mean, even to the extent that like, I think Sean Strickland thinks on a level of, like everything's a 1-2, but there's so much permutation in that of like, how am I going to angle this right hand? It comes from such weird trajectories. It is someone on Twitter. I'm sorry. I cannot remember who it was, but it was a comment I liked. They said he throws that right hand like he's moving chess pieces, which is weird. And I'm not 100% sure I know what it means, which is why I think it's a good description. That there's like a clear thought and intent in what Strickland does, but it's so unorthodox and wonky it can sort of belie the thought going into it. So yeah, basically, like as this fight went on, he was like, what if I throw the right hand at this bizarre question mark angle? And he started to connect. He started to find ways around Brendan Allen's guard. And Brendan Allen didn't have just even like an iota of success in out-wrestling Strickland. And so Strickland was able to counter his way into the fight and then just completely take over.
Do you feel like Strickland is like so gradating the power of his shots more? Because I do feel like he used to be more of a just like jab and right hand guy, and the right hand was hard and the jab wasn't particularly. That he's really like it's much harder to tell which is the hard shot now.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. A lot of people were also, I didn't think of this at all at first. But the longer I've sat with it, the more I can see why. A lot of people were making Diaz comparisons.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that. I think that's a very good point. 'Cause like Strickland before, his nickname is Tarzan, which seems really silly. If you know his like typical way of fighting, which is like, seems so buttoned down and controlled and neutralizing. But there are also moments, especially before the UFC, but also moments in the UFC where Sean Strickland would just go absolutely apeshit, and swing just crazy hooks and storm after people. When he goes for the finish, he looks like that. This was, I think, the first time I can think of where he seemed to like find that power without having to break out of the safe style with which he's clearly more comfortable. So yeah, I thought it was it's again, a weird idiosyncratic way of doing it, but, like a quite subtle counter boxing performance from Sean Strickland. Like he really did think his way back into a fight that was not going his way much more profoundly than I expected in the first few minutes.
But he had to win because you convinced me to pick against him.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad I did it too.
Thus, his victory was guaranteed.
I'm glad I did it too.
I know, you're a big Sean Strickland fan, and I knew as soon as I did it that you tricked me.
Gotcha, bitch. Way to go, Sean. He didn't even have to ask Brendan Allen to fall, which was also nice. That was gratifying. Anything else from this card that you want to touch on? Corey McKenna, Kay Hansen, great women's fight. Women's strawweight, two scrappy brawlers, except Kay Hansen pretty clearly won. That was a class of fight. I'm like a total weirdo hipster with these, but like, what was it? Oh my God. So my brain is just not functioning today. Ricardo Ramos fought Korean guy. You know who I'm talking about, Phil.
Yes, I think I do. Oh God.
You know, right? Like me.
Kyung Ho Kong?
Ooh, that was it. Yeah, like me, you really didn't want to take a guess at a Korean name, did you? You're just going to end up putting in some other interchangeable piece that's completely wrong. Yeah, that's the kind of matchup that the phrase always jumps to my mind is just well matched. Where like there are no real momentum shifts, or what momentum shifts there are quickly answered. Everything is just like a nice simmering level of competition from beginning to end. And McKenna Hansen was that kind of fight. So if you missed it, the main card opener, I think both of these women are really good additions to the strawweight division. And, really I say Hansen won because like she was the only one who had a distinct advantage, which was her takedown game. But other than that, it was just super well matched and close the entire way through. Anything else?
No, nothing else really sprung to mind.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. I don't know. Weird energy on this.
Alex Moreno had an incredibly Alex Moreno fight with Riz McKee.
I think the fact that he did that is what brought Betch Correia back from the dead. Because I don't know if you saw it, but she just got another matchup in the UFC. I thought she was done.
Oh, we knew this. We knew she was. I told you she was coming back.
Did we?
One last. This is our retirement fight, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I was at least momentarily excited, and I was grateful.
You should be excited anyway.
Sure. I was excited with the idea that Alex Moreno had somehow summoned her from the deep. With his normal man victory.
That is, yeah. I'm now kind of upset that I've ruined that for you.
Yeah, you kind of disillusioned me.
Someone who's just like disillusioned a kid who was believing in Santa.
Yeah. Heavy Hands Disenchantment Edition. Well, that concludes this sort of bizarrely disjointed episode of Heavy Hands. I don't know. I didn't really know how to, justifiably hate Shevchenko. I didn't know how to get super hyped for a flyweight main event, even though I'm one of flyweight's most stalwart defenders. Just kind of a weird episode, but fortunately, this will be the last week for weird episodes. Next week, Heavy Hands will be back to discuss Curtis Blades versus Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
No, that's not weird. That's normal. This is the kind of fights normal people like. So that's going to be great. Make sure you tune in then to hear more of this bullshit. Until then, you can find Phil and I on social media. Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson on Twitter. I am at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H. And just real quick before we finally sign out, Jesus Christ. Phil, anything to plug this week?
I've been on holiday and thus have not been reading too much.
Beautiful. Well, I am actually working on an article. People may have noticed I've put out several articles recently. For what feels like the first time in quite some time. So I almost actually feel safe telling you, before having completed it, that I'm writing something about the Queen of Hell herself, Valentina Shevchenko. I think a technically focused piece, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Should be coming towards the end of the week, Thursday or Friday most likely, on bloodyelbow.com. Something about the most evil woman in MMA. And that's it. Until next week, Blades, Lewis, get hyped. We'll talk to you then. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.